April 30th, 1993. A 19-year-old tennis prodigy sits in her chair during a routine changeover, toweling off after dominating another match. She leans forward to take a sip of water, her mouth dry from the Hamburg heat. The cup barely touches her lips when she feels a horrible pain slice through her back. She whips around to see a man in a baseball cap, a sneer across his face, his hands clutching a 9-inch knife. This is the moment that shattered not just Monica Seles' body, but her spirit, her career, and tennis history itself.
What happened to Monica Seles wasn't just a physical assault. It was the deliberate destruction of a young woman's dreams by someone who couldn't bear to see his favorite player lose. The psychological impact of such a violation goes far beyond any physical wound. This was terrorism in its purest form, using violence to achieve a specific outcome through fear.
I think that got to me more than anything, that there was no kind of punishment. The judge was like, oh, he won't do it again, so I'll let him go so he can really kill someone. It was insane and so nationality driven. If someone had done that to Steffi so Monica would win, they'd have thrown away the key.
To understand the magnitude of what was lost, you need to grasp what Monica Seles was accomplishing. Between January 1991 and February 1993, she reached the final in 33 of 34 tournaments she played, winning 22 titles. She had won 8 Grand Slams before her 20th birthday. These numbers surpass anything we've seen from Serena, Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic at their peaks.
Today we're examining one of sport's darkest moments, how a single act of obsessive violence derailed what could have been the greatest tennis career in history, how Monica Seles fought her way back from physical and psychological devastation, and how her attacker achieved exactly what he set out to do, changing tennis forever. Monica Seles wasn't just talented, she was a phenomenon that tennis had never seen before. Born in Yugoslavia, she became the youngest ever French Open champion at 16, going on to dominate the women's circuit with 8 major championships while still a teenager. Her two-handed ground strokes on both sides were revolutionary, creating angles and power that opponents couldn't match.
What made Seles special was her fearlessness. She hit the ball on the rise, creating those great angles her father taught her by drawing Tom and Jerry on tennis balls. She could hit harder than anyone, but also sooner than anyone. By April 1993, she had won 8 of the last 11 Grand Slam events she'd entered. She was rewriting what was possible in women's tennis.
The psychological pressure she put on opponents was immense. Her signature grunts, her aggressive style, her youth, she was dismantling established hierarchies. Most recently, she had defeated Steffi Graf in a crackling 3-setter at the 1993 Australian Open. Graf, the established queen, was losing her grip on tennis.
But there was someone watching who couldn't bear Seles' success. Günter Parch, a 38-year-old unemployed lathe operator from Germany, was obsessed with Steffi Graf. He wanted nothing more than to see Graf return to the top, and he was willing to commit violence to make it happen.
Parch represented the dark side of fandom, when admiration becomes possession, when support becomes obsession. He had managed to walk down the pedestrian aisle unnoticed, carrying a kitchen knife with a clear mission: to remove Monica Seles from tennis, so Steffi Graf could reclaim her throne.
April 30th, 1993, 6:50 p.m., Hamburg, Germany, the Citizen Cup quarterfinals. Seles was leading Magdalena Malieva 6-4, 4-3. During the 90-second changeover, as Seles sat toweling off, Parch struck. The blade penetrated half an inch between her spine and left shoulder blade. Had she not leaned forward at that exact moment, she would have been paralyzed.
I remember sitting there, toweling off, and then I leaned forward to take a sip of water. Our time was almost up, and my mouth was dry. The cup had barely touched my lips when I felt a horrible pain in my back. My head whipped around towards where it hurt, and I saw a man wearing a baseball cap, a sneer across his face. His arms were raised above his head, and his hands were clutching a long knife. He started to lunge at me again. I didn't understand what was happening.
Blood could be seen on her white shirt dripping down from her wound. The 8,000 people in the crowd were shocked, and so was the rest of the world when the news spread. But the physical injury was just the beginning. The psychological trauma of being attacked while doing what you love most creates a kind of damage that goes far beyond what any doctor can heal.
What happened next revealed the true villainy of this story. Parch received only a 2-year suspended sentence. A German court convicted him of grievous bodily harm, but he served no jail time. The message was clear. Attacking a tennis player to help your favorite wasn't really a serious crime.
A later court upheld the verdict, in part because Seles did not want to come back to Hamburg and sit in a courtroom with Parch. Can you imagine? The victim was essentially blamed for not confronting her attacker again. The system failed her completely. Parch achieved his goal with minimal consequences.
Meanwhile, Graf was back at number 1 just 5 weeks after the stabbing. Of the 10 Grand Slams Seles missed while absent, Graf won 6. Parch's plan worked perfectly. The tennis establishment moved on as if nothing had happened, even continuing the Hamburg tournament despite Seles lying in a hospital bed.
A few weeks later, a board meeting with the top players voted against her being granted a protected ranking. Even her fellow players abandoned her. She was erased from tennis as efficiently as Parch had planned. The tour moved on, rankings shifted, and Monica Seles became a footnote.
The contrast is staggering. While Seles fought for her psychological survival, the tennis world celebrated Graf's return to dominance. No one seemed to care that this return was achieved through violence. The sport that should have protected its young star instead participated in her erasure.
But the true horror was what happened to Monica herself. She didn't play tennis for 2 years and suffered from depression as well as an eating disorder as a result of the attack. The fearless champion had become a traumatized young woman, afraid to return to the sport that had defined her life.
It was very hard to understand how on the tennis court, I would be so focused and so disciplined in my training. But when it came to binge eating, I had zero control. I felt really embarrassed about it. I felt ashamed about my binge eating for so long. I required a lot of comfort and found it in pints of ice cream and greasy bags of chips.
Her binge eating began following the knife attack. She was treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. Food became her way of self-medicating, of finding comfort in a world that had become terrifying. She would go back to her hotel room after matches and empty the mini-bar snacks, potato chips, pretzels, and cookies.
Her father's cancer diagnosis later that year only added to her despair. The man who had taught her to love tennis by drawing cartoon characters on balls was dying. The foundations of her world were crumbling one by one.
She thought the binges were an emotional reaction to her stabbing and her father's illness, but her coaches and parents would tell her to get a grip. The more they said it, the more ashamed she felt, and the more she withdrew from them. She was fighting battles no one understood.
But Monica Seles was made of something special. Not until August 1995 did she return to competitive tennis, winning the title in Toronto without dropping a set. It was a moment of pure triumph, the wounded champion reclaiming her throne.
Next came the US Open, where she made a superb run to the final, losing a dramatic 3-setter to Graf. Standing across the net from the player whose fan had destroyed her life, competing at the highest level, that took unimaginable courage.
In January 1996, she won her 4th Australian Open and final Grand Slam title. It was bittersweet, a 9th Grand Slam, but a career that should have reached 20 or more. Some involved with the sport have declared that Seles could have become the most accomplished female player ever.
We'd be talking about Monica with the most Grand Slam titles ahead of Margaret Court or Steffi Graf. The world will never know what could have been.
But Seles was never the same. By the time she became a fixture again on tour, she had lost the edge, the hunger, the youthful gusto, as well as the wiry physique that had once made her unstoppable. The stabbing had shocked her out of her fearless trance permanently.
Trauma changes the brain's threat detection system. At first, Seles was tentative about walking back on a tennis court. How do you maintain the warrior mindset needed for championship tennis when you've learned that violence can strike anywhere, anytime?
I can't say whatever was meant to be was meant to be. When I look back, I'm sure my career, in terms of achievement, would have been different if I hadn't been stabbed. And I'll always wonder why I'm the only one in history who that ever happened to.
The ripple effects extended far beyond Monica herself. Tennis still needs to make progress in promoting a healthy body image. Young ladies in tennis have always been judged on how they look, and it is still the reality. Her struggles with weight after the attack became another source of shame and judgment.
Fortunately, there have been few cases of fans getting onto the field and directly assaulting athletes since then, but the vulnerability remains. Players are still exposed, still dependent on security systems that can fail.
The psychological impact on other players was significant too. Knowing that someone could walk onto a court and attack you for being too successful creates a different kind of pressure. It changed how athletes think about their own safety in competition.
What Monica did next showed her true character. She released her memoir, Getting a Grip, on My Body, My Mind, Myself in 2009, chronicling her bout with depression and binge eating disorder after her stabbing. She transformed her pain into purpose.
I wanted to let people out there who struggle from binge eating disorder know they're not alone. If you feel you're experiencing some of the symptoms, go out there, talk to your healthcare provider. There's help out there. You don't have to suffer in silence like I did for so many years.
As of 2015, Seles became a paid spokesperson for Shire Pharmaceuticals, the makers of the first drug approved to treat binge eating disorder. She turned her struggle into advocacy, helping millions who face similar battles.
Today, Monica Seles lives in Florida as a motivational speaker, author, mental health advocate, and fitness enthusiast. She's married to businessman Tom Golisano and continues her advocacy work. The wounded champion became a healer.
Her speaking fee ranges from $30,000 $50,000, and she travels from Sarasota speaking on topics including overcoming adversity, mental health, and personal growth. She's transformed the worst moment of her life into a message of hope for others.
She's concerned about child welfare and is a great advocate for encouraging young athletes to live stress-free, healthy lifestyles. The girl who was attacked for her success now protects other young athletes from similar pressures.
Meanwhile, what happened to Günter Parch? He lived the remainder of his life in a nursing home in the central German village of Nordhausen and passed away in his sleep in August 2022. He died having achieved exactly what he set out to do. He changed tennis history through violence.
Parch's success is the most chilling part of this story. He identified the greatest threat to his idol's dominance and eliminated it with surgical precision. The tennis establishment's failure to protect Seles or punish him adequately sent a message that such attacks could be effective.
This case study in trauma and resilience shows us both the worst and best of human nature. One man's obsession destroyed what could have been the greatest career in tennis history. But one woman's courage transformed that destruction into a force for healing others.
Monica Seles' story reminds us that heroes aren't just those who win championships. They're those who survive the unthinkable and choose to help others do the same. She lost the tennis legacy she deserved, but she gained something perhaps more valuable: the ability to heal wounds that extend far beyond any tennis court. This episode was brought to you by Unstruct AI, where we explore the human cost of obsession, violence, and the courage to rebuild. Today, we've witnessed how a single moment of terror changed tennis forever, how Günter Parch's knife didn't just wound Monica Seles' back, but carved a permanent scar across sport itself. We've seen how institutional failure, the lenient sentence, the lack of support, the rush to move on can compound trauma and reward violence. But we've also seen how someone can take the worst moment of their life and transform it into a source of healing for millions. Monica Seles lost the tennis career she deserved, but she found something perhaps more important: the strength to turn her pain into purpose. When we face our own moments of devastating loss, we can remember her example. That survival isn't just about enduring, but about choosing to become someone who helps others endure too. Sometimes the greatest victories happen not on the scoreboard, but in the quiet moment when someone decides to turn their wounds into wisdom.